nonstop because it happens.
Yeah.
So, I understand. We're going to start.
Yeah. I don't know.
Thank you, Gary, for sharing that with me.
Madam Chair, so whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the November 15th, 2017 meeting of the Transportation Access Advisory Committee. Thank you for coming today. A couple of quick announcements. One is that the meeting date was changed from our regular meeting, which would have been next Wednesday because of the holiday. So I just wanted to remind you that's why we're meeting today and not the next Wednesday. And then the last thing is that citizens' participation will be videotaped henceforward. So when you come to the podium or we bring you a microphone, please give your name and state it clearly and then say what you have to say. Okay? So we will start the meeting by the Pledge of Allegiance, and Janae is going to lead that for us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We're going to have our first public or citizens comments period, and that would be for anyone that's in the audience to speak on an issue that is on today's agenda. We would ask you to give your name when you speak, and also keep your comments to 3 minutes if you could. So is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on today's agenda at this point?
Nobody. Mary and Barbara.
Marion, are you going to? You are or you're not?
Yes,
Okay, we'll be right there.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Marion Barber. I just had a question because I noticed that you're doing extensions on the regular bus lines. Are there any extensions planned for the Summerlin area and the northwest area of the city? That's my question.
All right, Marion, we're going to be giving a presentation on that, and we'll cover it at that
Okay.
point, okay? Thank you. Anyone else?
And Madam Chair, I will ask who is on the conference bridge, and could you please state your name carefully? Clearly?
Nancy Broom. Evander Davis. Beth Logan. Laura Lee.
Great, thank you. And Madam Chair, one more. We've got many wonderful presentations, and folks, just appreciate your patience as we transition to each of those. And when you make your presentations, folks, the clicker is there. You can just advance it. For some, they're very graphics intense, so just press firmly. And that is it.
Great. And I'd like to welcome those folks that are on the telephone. Thanks for attending today, guys. Next on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the September 27th, 2017 meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
All right. All in favor of approving the minutes as they were sent, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. And now we are at the consent agenda, which is items 3 and 4. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Okay, now, is there anyone that would like to discuss anything that's on the consent agenda? In order to discuss it, you have to ask to have it removed from the agenda. So is there anyone that would like to discuss an item on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting the consent agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed? Great. Okay, we're at item number 5, which is to receive a report on the recognition of RTC's safety and security program, and that's going to be given by Scott Gallegos. So Scott?
Good afternoon. What I'm going to be discussing this afternoon is the Transportation Security Administration BASE program. So, what is the Mass Transit BASE? Well, this stands for Baseline Assessment for Security Enhancement, which is a voluntary review designed to evaluate security and emergency response programs on transit systems. The TSA, FTA evaluated 17 security and emergency management action items. Some of those action items include, do we have a security program and an emergency management program in written form, which we do. What are our roles as far as responsibilities for security and emergency management? Also, developing an information sharing process for threat and intelligence information. We also were rated for our conduct when it came to tabletop and functional drills, and also conducting background investigations of employees and contractors. So, what does that mean for us? Well, our base goals are establish, identify, elevate, and enhance. Establish a baseline of the Transportation Agency's internal security processes, procedures, and policies. Identify security program weaknesses. Elevate the Transportation Agency's overall security environment through those detected weaknesses. And enhance the security partnership with the TSA. With that said, the Gold Standard Award is awarded by achieving the highest scores on the BASE review specific to those 17 categories of security and emergency preparedness action items. RTC received this Gold Standard Award from the Department of Homeland Security with a score of 99.8%. Only 3 agencies in the country received this award for 2016, with RTC being the only transit agency on the West Coast to achieve this award. Through the 9/11 Commission Act Security Assessment Section, BASE was developed to increase domain awareness and response preparedness and enhance prevention and protection capabilities of America's transit systems. Please note that this is the second time RTC has received the Gold Standard Award. The first time was in 2011. And here we are. On September 14, 2017, this award was formally presented at the RTC Commission meeting by TSA to our RTC team. Here, I am showing you this award that we have, that we got presented. We're very proud of receiving this. And of course, a high five for success from Tina to my outstanding boss, Tamara Williams. Another outstanding picture of the RTC team with the TSA team. Again, working in collaboration with our partners on all levels. So, what does this mean for us? In March of 2017, RTC entered in a renewed agreement with Allied Universal and was able to maintain the same budget of $8.4 million. Accordingly, in July 2017, the officer count remains the same at approximately 174. The RTC has a total of 6 mobile rapid response security vehicles covering our 4 quadrants. And as you see, our response time in 2016 was 16 minutes. Now it's down to 15 minutes. That is a decrease by 6%. We also continue with special deployments in areas of concern as incidents occur within the system, such as specific onboard and platform deployments to impact safety proactively for our passengers as well as our coach operators. So, moving forward, we are implementing internal measures to include the See Something, Say Something mobile application. This application will allow our passengers to report real-time threats observed on the transit system for increased communication and safety. Officers will be placed strategically throughout the system to provide a greater frequency and security presence based on this real-time application, which will improve safety as well as using analytics to deploy Allied Universal Security officers in a more efficient as well as a strategic way. Also, the RTC continues a very proactive partnership with our local law enforcement agencies for a stronger collaboration to provide a safer environment for our customers to enjoy their transit experience. We're continually looking for innovations to improve the transit system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. Are there any questions for Scott? Well, congratulations once again to RTC. That's wonderful.
Thank you so much, and I thank you on behalf of the RTC Safety and Security team. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. All right, and now we have Nathan Goldberg coming up to talk to us about the December service changes.
This is Robert Lee. I have a question to say here. Remember, the people that are on the phone with me, they're not on mute, and it's difficult for me to hear. So I wonder if the people with me, would they put their phones on mute for me and everybody else?
That's a good idea, Robert. Hopefully they will.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Nathan Goldberg, RTC, Manager of Transit Planning. I am here to provide a brief overview on the December service change. That service change will take place this year on Sunday, December 3rd. It's a little later than what we had been doing in the past, but that date works out a little bit better for us this year. We have a focus this year on frequency upgrades. There is not a new route this year. There is also a geographical extension of Route 105 Martin Luther King. That will now extend up North 5th Street to the large-scale Target Shopping Center at North 5th and Clark County 215. In addition to that, there are span of service increases on many of the routes. Rather than go through every single route and what it will entail, I can take specific questions either now or I can answer those after. I'll also provide a detailed listing, route-by-route listing that can be emailed out to the committee. Regarding the question earlier about Summerlin and the Northwest, there are no geographical changes to routes in that area during this service change. The only major geographical change is to Route 105. With that, I'll turn it over to the committee for questions on specific route-by-route questions. And of course, also of note to the committee would be that the extension to Route 105 does come along with the extension of paratransit service into that area as well.
I have one question to ask. How come the 210 bus doesn't go up to Red Rock?
At this time, that would be extending the 210 out to where the 206 and the SX layover currently are is something that would be in the long-term list of things to do. There just is not the budget available to do that at this time.
Okay, thank you. Wanted to make that suggestion.
Robert, could you state your name for the record?
Robert Lee.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Nathan? All right, hearing none. Thank you very much, Nathan. Now we have Mohammed Farhan talking about, giving us a report on the Henderson ADA planning study.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Mohammed Farhan, RTC Planning. The Unified Planning Work Program for the MPO 2016-2017 included the City of Henderson Americans with Disabilities Act planning study. The purpose of the study is to provide background research on demographics and provide planning level ADA analysis of typical developments in the Henderson community. This information will be a starting point for the city of Henderson to update or create a new ADA transition plan to include the necessary assessments of public rights of way. So we have, to conduct the study, we have hired Kimberly Horn, and we have staff from the Kimberly Horn, Lindsay Sainer and Erin Urich. So they will make this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Farhan. Good afternoon, everyone. As Farhan mentioned, my name is Lindsay Sainer with Kimberly Horn. Just a quick overview, again, of the purpose of the study. It's really to understand the needs of the public within the City of Henderson public right-of-way, and to identify the barriers for accessibility to amenities and to transit, and also how to best allocate funds and prioritize the barriers that we observed in our field visits. So the key components to the study, first were existing conditions. We worked with the city to collect land use information through their GIS database, and we used that to develop four geographic locations that we intended to study. And then we went forward to the public through surveys and meetings with stakeholders to kind of just get everyone's buy-in on those locations, and also identify any other barriers that we needed to include in the study. And from there, we went out in the field and conducted the self-evaluation of those locations. And the results of the self-evaluation then led to the next steps for the city in developing their strategies for improvement. So here's the list of the different types of data we worked with the city to gather through their GIS database. We looked for land use and right-of-way data. We also included all of the transit stop locations within the city of Henderson, and then also gathered information on population and employment and other demographic information. And working with the city, we used all that information we gathered to then identify 4 locations that are geographically dispersed within the city, but also diverse in types of locations. So we looked for a commercial district with transit, senior community area, an area with a school walking route, and then just an overall residential area. So with that information, here are the 4 locations that we identified preliminarily before the public outreach portion. Here's the commercial district along Sunset Road in front of the Galleria Mall. The second here is the intersection of Anthem Parkway and Hampton Road down in Anthem near the community center. The third location is the intersection at College Drive and Heather Drive between the College of Southern Nevada and Foothill High School. And then finally, we looked at Green Valley Parkway, where the offset T intersections exist between Robindale and Silver Springs Parkway. And so with those locations identified, we went out through an online survey and also a hard copy survey. We visited several stakeholders within the city of Henderson to get their input and also help to distribute the survey. It was distributed through the city of Henderson and also RTC's websites and social media. And so, did I do something? Thank you.
Look at that.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
And so the results of the survey, in general, comments were aligned with what we were looking to accomplish with the goals of the study, just to identify those key barriers of path of travel and accessibility to different amenities. And so with that, we decided to move forward with the 4 locations that we had identified. And within those locations, the facilities that we intended to study as sort of a sampling for the city, a pilot study, where we looked at 3 signalized intersections 3 miles of sidewalk, including driveways, unsignalized intersections, and curb ramps along those 3 miles, and then also 3 transit stops within the city. And so I will now turn it over to Erin, who's going to talk a little bit more about the analysis and the results that we found.
Thanks, Lindsay. So we wanted to briefly describe what we did for our field evaluations and give you a glimpse of some of the results. Just note this is just a snippet of what we found. But what you're seeing up on the screen right now is our data collection application, where we have the blue dots. Those are our signalized and unsignalized intersections on one of the particular locations that we evaluated, and the associated curb ramps, which are the orange dots. Now, the entire pedestrian path of travel Lindsay mentioned is where you're going to see the green, red, purple, and blue lines. Now, the green represents sidewalks that had good concrete, but we were looking at widths and cross slopes. The red lines indicate where there was disruption in the concrete, so you may have had heaving, sinking, cracking, ponding, and we'll show you some pictures of this moving forward. And then the cross streets and the driveway crossings for pedestrians. So once we finished our evaluations, we also wanted to prioritize the issues that we found. So for each of the facility types, we had a different prioritization scale, but basically all of these were developed based on proximity to pedestrian attractors and the severity of noncompliance. The purpose of this being another factor for the city to use in determining where to spend their funding. So for signalized intersections, some common issues that we found, the curb ramp on the left-hand side does not have detectable warning surfaces, which are intended to be a curb replacement at the base of the curb ramp where a pedestrian would enter the intersection. On the right-hand side, we have a pedestrian push button, but it is more than 10 feet offset the face of curb, and then also the clear space that's in front of the push button to allow someone to have access to activate the push button has slopes that are greater than 2%. And similar issues were found on the curb ramps for unsignalized intersections with a lack of detectable warning surfaces. As a part of this, we also are developing a planning level cost estimate so that the city can develop an overall budget to remove these barriers over time. And so that's what you're seeing here in this table is each of the locations and the planning level estimate that we came up with. For sidewalk issues, several of the common issues on the left-hand side, you see some sidewalk, but what's happening here is that there are vertical discontinuities that have elevation changes greater than 1/4 of an inch, and that often happens when you have joint displacement. One sidewalk panel is higher up than the other. On the right-hand side, we have a obstruction in the pedestrian path of travel, but I do want to note that just because something's in the sidewalk does not mean it's an obstruction. It is where we have a reduction in the clear width to get by that obstruction by less than 36 inches. And then the photo on the bottom shows where we have utility lids in the sidewalk, which is not necessarily an issue, but because it's causing that sinking problem that you see on the right-hand side, it is an accessibility obstruction. So again, for the sidewalk evaluations, we found that roughly 21% of the sidewalks that we evaluated were compliant, which is pretty standard across the agencies that we've looked at across the United States. And then again, we have the planning level cost projections that not only include the sidewalk path of travel, but also the associated curb ramps, driveways, and cross streets along those sidewalk corridors. And finally, with the transit stops, some of the common issues that we found was a boarding and a lighting area issue where it was either less than 8 feet long or less than 5 feet wide, or there may have been some slope issues in that boarding and a lighting area. Also, next to benches that are under the transit shelters, those are required to have clear spaces, and some of those clear spaces had slopes in excess of 2%. We also evaluated the transit stop signage, which you can see on the right-hand side, where only the route information is required to be compliant, but there were some challenges that we found with the text that was selected for these signs. And again, the planning level cost estimates and priorities for each of those transit stops that we evaluated. So really, what does this mean? As Lindsay mentioned, this is a pilot study so that we could determine methodology for how to evaluate the pedestrian facilities in the public rights-of-way, our methodology for prioritizing these, and also for coming up with the planning level cost estimates. So the next steps are to move forward with the remainder of the self-evaluations for the pedestrian facilities in the public rights-of-way and integrate these into the existing ADA transition plan that the city currently has that looks at the programmatic and other facilities within the city. And finally, we're also developing guidance for city staff so that they can design and construct new pedestrian facilities in compliance with ADA standards and also maintain those facilities in an accessible condition. Thank you for your time.
Very nice, ladies. Are there any questions for Lindsay or Aaron?
Yes, I have one question. I don't know if this is your area, but I would like to see them fix the sidewalk on the northwest corner also in Rainbow, so people don't have to go in the gravel around that street light.
Robert, this is Dan Howland. So the area that you're talking about is not in Henderson, correct?
No, that's not in Henderson.
No.
That's in Rainbow in Las Vegas.
So it'll be noted for the record that you mentioned that area could use some work.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Aaron? Oh, go ahead.
This is Beth Logan. I have 2 questions.
Go ahead, Beth.
Okay, the first question that I have is regarding the surveys that were done and the studies. What was identified as the number 1 barrier to accessibility? Or what's the most common one?
I think our most common response to that question about barriers was just the path of travel and width of sidewalk, condition of sidewalk, overgrown vegetation, just things that that limit accessibility along the path of travel.
I see, thank you. And then my second question is, okay, with all the findings that were applied to the sewer areas, is this going to be the standard procedure for future, as you said, for future areas that are going to be constructed? But then, what about the ones that are already in place that have, existing barriers? Are they going to be, redone, or what's the plan?
Yes, so the purpose of developing the ADA transition plan is to identify all barriers to access and then come up with basically an accessibility master plan so that over time, whatever the time frame for all the barrier removals, eventually all the barriers that are identified will be removed.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Lindsay and Aaron. Good job. All right, and now we have Kenny Rodriguez, who's going to be presenting on the illegal and disruptive behavior policy.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. Kenny Rodriguez, Manager of Customer Care. So as I mentioned last TAC meeting, I would present the revised RTC illegal and disruptive behavior policy, which I believe you've all received in your packets prior to the meeting. The new policy is referred to as the RTC Passenger Code of Conduct. So we wanted to get that out to you so we can get some of your input on the new policy as we'll have to move forward with this to go to the board for approval. But before we get some input, I want to go over kind of how this was structured, how I devised this new policy. The FTA releases a circular that identifies issues or questions they commonly receive from agencies or possibly clients. And in November of 2015, they released the circular 4710.1, and one of the sections under it was service denials due to rider conduct. So this was one of the sections, probably the most important section I reviewed prior to making this new policy. And just want to go over a couple things that they highlight in here. I'll be very brief. I don't want to run too long. Dan knows I like to talk a lot, so I'll make it as brief as Kenny can possibly make it. So in the first section, they mentioned the requirement. Basically, why they're even discussing this is there is a stipulation, the FTA, the law says, it is not discrimination under this part for an entity to refuse to provide service to an individual with disabilities because that individual engages in violent, seriously disruptive, or illegal conduct or represents a direct threat to the health or safety of others. However, an entity shall not refuse to provide service to an individual with disabilities solely because that individual's disability results in appearance or involuntary behavior that may offend, annoy, or inconvenience employees of the entity or other persons. So that's the purpose, that's what the law says. So the next section is kind of the discussion portion. One of the things I want to point out is that they do permit transit agencies to refuse to provide service to an individual with disabilities because that individual engages in violent, seriously disruptive, or illegal conduct, or the individual constitutes a direct threat to others. And I'll speak a little more to direct threat to others in a second. The next section is how they determine seriously disruptive behavior. And I wanted to highlight this because this is one of the difficult parts of my job. They specifically say here, it can be especially challenging to assess whether a rider's behavior rises to the level of seriously disruptive, given that a refusal of service can be a denial of civil rights. So I have to always take that into consideration prior to making any decision to suspend someone. The next section basically identifies what a direct threat means, how you determine a direct threat. So it basically says a public entity, a direct threat is an individual poses a direct threat to the health or safety of others. In determining whether an individual poses a direct threat to the health or safety of others, a public entity must make individualized assessments. And the reason that's important is this isn't really cookie cutter. We got to make sure that I don't just go and say, hey, this happened to you, here's the ramifications. No, we have to look at each individual incident separately and look at that client's background and previous incidents. The FTA emphasizes that the definition of direct threat refers to a direct threat to other individuals and not to the person with the disability. This is also very important. We get reports of, we call them SIB, self-injurious behavior. That's not considered a direct threat to others. Now, self-injurious behavior could cause other issues, maybe bodily fluids, something like that. But just because of someone's banging their head, that's really not, doesn't fall under this policy. And that's something I want to put out there because there's a lot of people don't understand that. The next step is they want to know the steps to take before refusing service. Before refusing service to an individual with a disability, the FTA encourages transit agencies to make reasonable attempts to resolve issues with riders or, if appropriate, caregivers and guardians. And the last section, the right of an individual to contest service denials. Service refusal cannot be permanent unless an individual continues to pose a direct threat to the health or safety of others. Riders must have the opportunity to subsequently present information to the transit agency demonstrating that issues have been resolved or presenting options to mitigate any problems to have service reinstated. So that's all I wanted to get out there before we receive your input. At this point, I'm ready to answer any questions you may have.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Dan.
how does the proposed new policy differentiate or differ from what's currently in place?
So the big thing, really what we, a lot of it's more vague in the description of services. The past one, we really want to get specific in the services. Example, Deuce on the Strip. We used to have CatStar, paratransit. This is going to be vague. It's going to cover everything. And the reason we want to go that route is when we have changes in service, we don't have to go and remodify the original proposal. The original proposal was modified, I believe, 5 times since it was in inception in February of 2000.
One follow-up on this is, are you the sole authority to make the determination as to what's disruptive? Or is there a committee?
Is Kenny Rodriguez the sole, or the RTC the sole?
Is it you that makes the decision?
So the decision, the first level decision, so that's in the appeal process.
Okay.
It's handled at the first level through customer care. At the second level, it would be the director of
I got it.
paratransit.
Okay, so it'd go to Dan.
Correct.
And the final-
Or in the case where it's a transit, fixed route, or security issue, second level would go to Scott Gallegos.
Okay.
Well, director of safety and security.
I think it's important for you to make that distinction between self-inflicted injury as opposed to injury on others. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because my sister uses the paratransit, and she experienced a Down syndrome individual about 2 weeks ago who was extremely harmful to himself while he was on the paratransit. And the paratransit driver did an outstanding job, according to my sister and the other people on the bus, to contain the situation, but it was a sad thing to see. so in that, he was banging his head against the window.
Correct.
To the point where he was bleeding. And so it was considered obviously a disruption emotionally to the rest of the passengers, but it was self-inflicted. So in that case, coming before you, how would you address that?
So if that was reported to us and we received it, we would look into the situation. First thing we do is we always review video. So we're going to look at, number one, history. That's the very first thing. What's the history? What's the client? What's their behavior? If there was a past incident or previous incident, we would get together in a case like that. Maybe they have a representative, social worker, Desert Regional Center representative, or in the case of a work site, we would get all the parties together and identify, number one, what were the triggers? And number two, can we successfully transport in the future, or are we setting this client up for failure? So I'd like to say that since I've been here, we've had very few, I don't want to call them permanent suspensions because they're indefinite suspensions, because you can always come back and reappeal it, where we've met with the parties involved. They're behavior experts. They will tell us this client will have this behavior again, and until we can come up with a solution, we don't feel that it's right to put them back on the bus. And the partnership with the work sites and, again, Desert Regional Center have been wonderful. I like to thank them because I start off the meeting letting them know I'm a transportation expert, which some people question, but I'm not a behavior expert, and I will admit that. So we rely on the behavior experts. Yeah. I didn't say Dan's name on record, so. But yeah, we rely on the behavior experts to let us know, are we setting this client up to fail? You know, and they've been very honest, and they've worked very well with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And one other thing I want to talk about is we want to be more transparent with each step of the policy and what to expect if you do engage in this. So that's what the new policy has, a lot more step-by-step and what to expect.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Are there other questions for Kenny?
Can I have two questions, please?
Okay, now I'll get you.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. The first question is, okay, when riders are, agree to the services that are provided by RTC, is there anything there, you know, like when you purchase something online, you get something like agree, right? Can they agree to a certain standard of behavior so that it would be something that would discuss or describe what is considered disruptive?
So that's a great.
And they can sign that, like a contract or whatever?
Well, unfortunately, we don't require them to sign it. One thing we do is this is now included in the new Rider's Guide, Paratransit Rider's Guide. So when they become eligible, they do receive that information. We also put it up on on our websites. So the key is if a behavior occurs, we are going to notify you right away, and we're going to work to get through that behavior. And our goal, again, another thing I always say is we're in the transportation business. We're not in the suspension business. Our goal is to transport you and work and do everything we can to successfully transport the client in a safe manner.
Okay, and then my next question, do the drivers get any training in like mental health issues, how they can identify that, you know, maybe it's not that they're being really actually disruptive because they meant harm, or maybe it's just they forgot to take their meds. You know, do they get any training at all?
I'm going to let I'll let Dan Hallen answer that one.
Hi, Elizabeth. Could you just state your name just so that we know who asked the questions, because it was we couldn't hear you quite well. Could you state your name for the record?
Oh, Elizabeth Logan.
Thank you. So as Kenny said, this is Dan Howland. With respect to the specific training that you're talking about, what I will do, because it's a very good question, and we've had our folks from our contractor TransDev come and speak on a variety of issues, and one of them that they can speak to in a future meeting here, and I'll look at that for January or March, most likely January, is their sensitivity training, and that would also include any training they have in regards to your question. What I would like to say is, as Kenny spoke about investigations, I myself review videotape as well, and to Dan Hyde's point, what his sister witnessed on the bus, and the reaction of the driver. I have viewed several videotapes as of late, and I just want to say, and I'm not saying this because I'm the director of paratransit for RTC, I'm saying this because it was emotional to watch the drivers and the way they conducted themselves under situations of extreme duress, and they did an outstanding job. And so many things could have gone wrong as a result of the interaction they had to do, and they just did wonderfully. So I think it's a great question, and I think it's something that we will have a presentation on for you. Thank you.
Janae?
Thank you. Comment, two questions. First comment is, thank you, Kenny, because you have been, at least my experience working with you and your team, you guys have always acknowledged the individualized approach and the denial of rights, and that is something that's very important to the people who are riding paratransit. So that's my first comment. My first question is, the first page, number 19, refusing to board vehicle within a reasonable period of time. Could you provide any guidance, or are you going to provide any guidance on what that actual period of time would be?
So, would you like a scenario? Would that help describe it?
If that's going to help, sure.
And I actually added this one myself because it's been through experience. What we see is, I don't want to use the word hostage, but we have certain clients who will go, they're not ready, but what they'll do is either they'll put their PCA on the bus and then they leave, or they'll put in their articles on the bus and then leave and finish what they're doing. So if you want to know a reasonable time, we always say 5 minutes is our time. But those are extreme cases, and the only reason I put that on there is we've been seeing more and more of those. And there's nothing, it's nice to reflect back to something when we're saying, listen, you're not supposed to do this. Well, why, where? So we can always refer back to the code of conduct. Like I said, it's all too common. It's an uncomfortable situation for a driver because they physically can't remove items or people from their vehicle. And so that's kind of where that one came in.
Okay. And then the second is also related to time. On the second page under step 1, it refers to, this is the written notification, and then the response time no later than the date indicated in the letter. I guess my question was just, if there was going to be I guess just another time frame versus people using their own judgment, like within 15 days of receipt of the dated letter or something like that. Just a recommendation that, working with over 700 people a day who ride paratransit, to have those clear time frames and deadlines would help support the process.
Thank you. I took a note.
Other comments? Kenny, I'd like to make a comment. I'm really glad to see this because we've never seen a policy before on this issue. So I think that's really good, and I understand it's going to be online, and I love that. I would like to add for consideration something about when someone puts another passenger or a driver at risk, when they are threatening behavior, I believe they should be removed from the service immediately until the investigation is complete. And at that point, they should be able to come back if that's the decision or not if that's the decision. What concerns me is that a person harms another person and remains on the service until the investigation is complete, and I don't think that's appropriate.
May I speak to that? So in a case where it's violent behavior, we will, I can tell you, suspend. That's been our past practice. If it got through, but I can tell you our process is to suspend and notify everyone and start the investigation. So we've been really working hard with TransDev to ensure that we get the reports timely and also that the reports are accurate. And I'm going to give you an example. And we speak to this at our driver focus groups a lot. We meet with the drivers quarterly. We need to know more specifics when you're turning in a report. Example, a client hit another client. Okay. Did the client flail? Did the client put a fist and try to hurt this person? Or did the other client tell you that they got hit by the client and you didn't witness any of it? Those are all three different, I have to do it, my job's tough. I was telling Dan, you know, sometimes I lose either way. Whether I suspend them, I'm a bad person. If I don't suspend them, I'm a bad person. So I really have to look into each situation independently, and we do rely on those driver reports, their accuracy of them, to make that initial determination, because we haven't watched the video. We weren't present. We have to go solely off that, that report. But I can tell you, if it's something that's reported, we want immediate action. Not real time.
Madam Chair, I have a comment.
Yes.
First of all, Kenny, I do want to thank you as well as your team members for always looking at individuals and trying to meet their needs of transportation. Sometimes if it doesn't work through Pair Transit, RTC has other areas available to provide transportation, maybe one-on-one through 5307, ATS grants. So they're always looking at how can we get this person to and from their location safely for themselves as well as the other passengers. Also, I want to comment, Transdev and their drivers actually attend Easter Seals for a day in sensitive training, and we really appreciate meeting the drivers meeting the people that we're serving as well, and looking forward to working together as a collaboration.
In addition, also, we work with MTM. Some of the clients are Medicaid waiver eligible, and we do work with them for transportation options too.
Okay, any other comments?
Madam Chair, this is Beth Lager. I have one other question.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Regarding this disruptive riders, I know this is too much to ask, but is it possible to, if they're disruptive to other people in the bus, is it possible to transport them by themselves, I mean alone?
So what you're asking for is a reasonable accommodation for individual transportation. And they could put in a request for a reasonable accommodation for individual transportation. That would be reviewed by the agency. But again, I think Dan knows the stipulations we look for when we're looking at reasonable accommodations. There's a few factors.
Well, I think it goes back to what Kenny was talking about with respect to the investigation and Gene's question or statement about how the person should be removed immediately. But if someone's being disruptive, Kenny would have to investigate that matter. As he said, an example, flailing versus punching, that sort of thing. But it's a shared ride service, and we have to make sure that we are providing a shared ride service. And as Kenny said, a reasonable accommodation, like a, for lack of a better way of saying it, singling out or separating, would be an alteration of that service that under the FTA guidelines we would not have to do. It's certainly something that we'll look at on a case-by-case basis, but in general, a alteration of the service, which is a shared ride service, would probably be something that would be declined. But I then go back to the issue at hand. If it's a disruptive thing, it's going to be investigated and it will be handled according to investigation.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
Anything else?
Good job during time.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for your patience, because this is, I'll say it, one meeting late. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have Antoinette Braddock, who's going to be talking to us about the on-demand pilot program. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Antoinette Braddock, Contracts Supervisor with the RTC, and back this month to give you an update of where we are with our RTC on-demand pilot. So as we stand, we're working on finalizing contracts with Lyft, and we expect that those will go before our January board. And in the meantime, while we're doing all of that fun stuff, we will be doing some coordinated outreach to all of the clients that will be invited to participate in the program. And a little bit about what that entails is we're initially going to send out a letter which will invite the appropriate clients to 3 outreach events. Those outreach events will be an opportunity to really give some detailed information about what their options are, how they can use Lyft, how they'll do their scheduling, whether it's through their personal smartphone where they can download the Lyft app and book their own rides, or as previously noted, we will also provide a call-in feature where the clients can call in to RTC customer service and book their ride through Lyft. And so we're really excited about that. And we are also working with our providers and with Lyft to put together some sensitivity training for Lyft drivers. And Lyft has committed to providing that collateral, whether it's via a website or text messages, emails to their drivers, to ensure that we can disseminate that information throughout all of the Lyft drivers in the Valley, because of course you never know, which driver you're going to get. So that is where we are as of now, and we're moving forward and we're excited about it, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Are there questions for Antoinette? Antoinette, I'm going to apologize. I was in a little bit of a side conversation and I missed the first part, which is it still the pilot where it's like medical appointments and things like that, same day?
It is same day, and yes, it is a pilot. So it's a 6-month pilot. It is not specific to medical appointments. It is, appointments as clients see them. So, whether it's you're going to the bank, you're going to go to the grocery store, or you need to go to doctors. It's all inclusive.
Okay, great, thank you. Evander?
So when with that program, is your pass going to be still?
It's a great question. So with this program, it's a pilot, and it is limited to a specific group of clients, and the pass will not be accepted, and coupons will not be accepted. It's kind of a subsidy type. So the clients would be required to pay the normal $3 that you would pay on paratransit, and the RTC will subsidize up to $15. And clients, any trip beyond the 18, so the 3 and the 15, would be covered by the client. So it's cashless also, so it's all done with a personal credit card, whether it's prepaid or like a normal credit card. So to answer your question specifically, no sir, no coupons and no pass.
Still a good thing.
It is, because it's on demand, which is very different than paratransit. So that's really kind of the key there is it's not shared ride, it's on demand. So we're excited about it.
When is the 6 months up, Antoinette?
I'm sorry?
When is the 6 months up?
So we're moving towards a January 15th rollout, if you will. And so that would be in July 15th. And we're looking at a potential option for an additional 6 month on top of that, to kind of see, if there's anything that we need to kind of iron out, or anything else that we need to do.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Antoinette. And now we have Dan Howland, and he's going to be reviewing the new reports that were handed out before. So the monthly operational reports.
And Madam Chair, I will just make note that, folks, you should have handouts on that, the item 10 handout.
So thank you, Madam Chair. Dan Howland, Director of Paratransit RTC. And you've seen me up here a few times this past year talking about operating reports that you, as the TAC committee members, receive prior to the meeting. And I'm going to talk about a couple of those reports that we've been working on. And if you recall the last meeting, we talked at length about the wheelchair lift, mobility device lifts, and I've got a couple reports that you have in front of you I can talk about. A couple things I'd like to highlight, and Ramona Williams is passing out for us the new Rider's Guide, Paratransit Rider's Guide. This is available on the website, and it is the brochure that talks about how to ride and what to expect when you ride a paratransit bus here at the RTC. We've spent a lot of time on this, staff, myself, and made some updates, and we're very pleased with this finished product, and we're always reviewing to make appropriate revisions, updates, changes. So I wanted you to be aware of that. We've also made updates to the website that we've worked with our government affairs team with, and staff and I would like to direct your attention when you have an opportunity, if you have the resources, to look at the website. What we've done is we've added a certification page under transit services, and this will tell an applicant for paratransit what they can expect when they come to apply for paratransit eligibility. What they can expect from an interview, from a possible physical assessment, and also if they were denied services, how they would be able to appeal that decision. It also has many frequently asked questions and the answers to those questions. And we've done the same thing with respect to adding under paratransit on the website a frequently asked questions piece to the website, and it goes through many questions and answers. So I encourage you to take a look at the website, and I'd love to hear any of your feedback. We're really pleased with it. Adds more information, more transparency, and letting people know what to expect from RTC Paratransit. So with that, I just wanted to share those announcements with you. And I want to talk to you about some of the reports. So the first report is a single page. What you've received in the past is what was called a recertification report for our certification eligibility. And we have made some changes to that. Let me just talk, and I don't want to go into great detail and have it get confusing, but with the past report, our numbers were not always as accurate as we found through audits, etc. Tracking them through our system is cumbersome. The system's not designed to track the numbers the way we want to report them, and our vendor has acknowledged that. So what we did is we've undertaken a manual tracking process to also match that up and compare that to the automated process that we have tried to improve. So we've been doing that since September, and we're going to continue to do that to make sure that the report and our numbers are accurate. And this is the type of information that you'll receive, and we'll be confident that it is accurate and up to date. Now, with respect to the report that you have in front of you, this report has application type, it has certification status in the middle, and eligibility status breakdown. If you look at the total for certification status, it says 740 for October 2017. That means applications and certifications. If you look at the number below that for total for eligibility status breakdown, it says 737. So we would love to have that number 740 and 740, or 737 and 737. Why the variance? Well, the answer is data input error. So that's not why this report was generated. It's to track our demand and our applicants and our certification status and eligibility status. But it also helps us from a data entry standpoint. There's multiple people through the process which you know that when we have an applicant come in and they complete an application, we have 21 days to make a determination. So there's several hands that touch it in between that time, and so data entry-wise, errors can occur. So I can't guarantee you won't see a variance, but I'm pleased, and so is Kenny Rodriguez, who manages customer care, who was up here talking at length, taking up my time. We're very pleased with this small variance. So we're really happy to present this to you. It's been a long time coming. Certainly want your feedback on this report, and knowing that we can make changes, accept your feedback over time as you get this, as you have more questions. We're trying to make this as user-friendly as possible so that when you look at it and you have questions, we can make adjustments accordingly. I would like to say that what you'll receive in January, which will be with your operating reports, you will receive both October and November, because it takes, again, we have that 21 days. So we need, I want you to be providing a report that's not a static. If we provided a December report in January, it would still be it would not be static numbers. There still would be changes occurring because we haven't gone through the 21-day process for everybody. So that's the certification report. Now on to the LIFT report. So as I said in the last meeting, I was going to provide you two examples. These are very similar, but we have September and we have October. We have a cover page on each of them. This gives the reader a clear understanding of wheelchair lift maintenance, total unscheduled repairs number, total scheduled repairs, wheelchair lift repairs, issues reported by radio by operators. If you remember, the quality assurance team gave a presentation at the last meeting on pre and post checks. That's where the drivers, the operators, are reporting. I've done my pre-check on the lift, it's not working, I need to switch a vehicle off so it can get repaired. And number of preventative maintenance inspections completed. And that's a big number, 230. As I said, we have a very robust preventative maintenance program through our contractor TransDev and our RTC fleet management team. So if you turn the page on the September report and the October report, you'll see that those are essentially the same. They are the same. So, and I didn't bring my glasses up, of course, but you've got wheelchair lift issues that occurred in use and service, and then you got on the right-hand side top wheelchair lift issues that did not occur in service, okay? So those were found either through the pre and post check, or they were found in, meaning the non-service, they were found during the PM and they were corrected. And then below, you have the series of vehicles with respect to the number of vehicles with wheelchair lift issues from the radio log, and then the number of preventative maintenance inspections completed for each series of vehicle. And again, we have consistency with respect to the 230. Then the third page of both reports, October and September, this is where we want your feedback. On the September report, we have a pie chart, and on the October report, we have a bar graph. And this essentially goes over the issues found that in service and not in service, and breaks them down by percentage and category. So with this feedback, I'm certainly willing to and able to take, if you want time to review it. If you have comments now, we'd love to hear them. As I said before, your comments could be now, they could be 2 months from now. We have the ability to make changes to these reports if need be. So with that, I'd love to have any feedback that you have.
Are there any comments about the reports for Dan? If I understand correctly, Dan, these are two different ways we could see this material graphically. And so are you looking for someone to say, this works better for us, or are you looking...
Right, that third page on the two separate reports is the difference with respect to the pie chart versus the bar graph. That information is provided summary page and then broken down numerically. It's just another way for somebody. Some people like to look at the spreadsheet piece. Others like to look at pie charts, bar graphs, etc. So we're just trying to get your feedback as to what would be, consensus on what you'd want to see. And in my case, I can do without the pie chart and the bar graph. I know I'm looking at the numbers and I know what's going on. But then again, I'm in this stuff in the thick of it every single day, whereas you're looking at it and we're trying to make it user-friendly. And those bar graphs and pie charts might really hit home for you. So.
Okay, so if you have some comments for Dan about what works better for you or some suggestions on bar graphs or pie charts, whether we even need them or not, please go ahead and contact him. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. All right. The last thing on the agenda is our second session of public comments. And how much time do we have?
We have 25 minutes.
Okay, good. Then I'll open it up, and we have one person that indicated she'd like to speak, and that was Mary Ann Barber.
I think something's wrong with this booklet.
What booklet are you talking about?
The new RTC paratransit rider's guide.
Uh-huh.
And it's listed under children. I'm sure you did not run this by your legal department. Because it says that children under 6 years old who weigh less than 60 pounds should be secured in an improved child safety seat. You do not require that on the regular RTC buses. Therefore, as far as I know, paratransit cannot require them either.
Okay. Marion, thank you very much for that comment. We will review that, and we will get back to you and the committee in regards to your question.
I take my grandchildren frequently with me. I always bring a car seat for them, but legally I'm not required to.
Okay. Thank you for your comment.
Was that all you were planning on saying, Marion?
No, I was wondering whether we could readjust the fares for the RTC paratransit, because it's been over a year since you reviewed them, and I was wondering whether or not they could possibly be adjusted. I mean, I would be willing to pay $100 for like an 80 ride pass rather than a 46 ride pass. I mean, I don't know how that would work, but.
Marion, thank you for the comment. This has been talked about at meetings, and that question has come up before. At the present time, that has not been on the horizon as far as a change in that, but your note that you'd like to pay $1,000 for a 100 ride pass is noted. So, no, thank you for your comment, Marion.
All right. Are there any other people in the audience that would like to speak on anything issue related to paratransit or transit in general?
May I speak, Madam Chair? Oh, we do have somebody who would like to speak.
Thank you. My name is Doris Harper, and I just wanted to ask about the pilot program for the lift. I thought that was a pretty good program, but I was wondering, you said that if you use the lift program, the pilot program, you won't be able to use your card. So you just have to, is it like the process that the lift has where you have a app on your phone? Would it be something like that? Or
The pilot program that you're referring to that Ms. Braddock spoke about, that would allow you to use an application, a phone application, phone app, and to request rides and pay for the rides. You'd also be able to call into our call center to request a ride for those individuals that don't have a phone. As far as Ms. Braddock stated, for this particular pilot, which is a small area, they would not be able to use their pass for that. Now, if it is a pilot, so we're trying to find out and learn about how to provide this service potentially for a broader scale, such as paratransit. So again, it's just a pilot. So that doesn't mean that in the future the ride coupons would not work, but there's been no decisions on that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, it does.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And then Dan, you wanted to speak?
Yep, if I could, Madam Chair, one thing I did want to, a couple things I did want to mention while I was speaking, and you had brought it up at the last meeting, and you were curious as to how many eligible riders the RTC Paratransit service has, and how many people actually are using the service. And I can tell you that we will be providing a report, and you'll see that in the reports that are provided to you prior to the meeting. We will provide you with an up-to-date number on those total eligible for paratransit. Right now, we are approaching 18,000 eligible riders on paratransit. And I can tell you that the 6 months prior to through the end of September, 6 months prior and through the month of September, we had 10,428 individual eligible RTC Paratransit folks take an individual ride. So a lot of people using the service. 10,428. So we'll provide that number to you too. So the number that you will see for the 6 months prior in your January report will be through December 31st. And that is a question that Madam Chair had at the last meeting, so thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Any other, does anyone on the advisory group have anything they'd like to share? Dan? Okay.
Last month I was looking at
Gary, this is Dan Howland. The bus that you're referring to, and you may have to repeat yourself, I'm sorry, but there is a training bus that Paratransit has that looks much different than the regular cutaway buses that the RTC provides them. Right. Did it have horns on it? No, okay. Clark Hart, manager of the TransDev service, wanted to put them on, but we said no, so. That's a big vehicle.
Okay. I was hoping we could get away with this, but I guess this has to be read into the record, and bear with me, it is long, but I will read as fast as I can. It is from a paratransit rider, not driver, I said driver, didn't I? Rider, Brett Silver, to whom it may concern. I've been a paratransit rider for 20 years now, so needless to say, I'm very familiar with the rules, policies, and even the changes to the service over the years. Well, I'm noticing a new change that I really don't like very much. I'm noticing that there are people that are qualifying for the service that don't really need it, and they're actually quite bold about saying so. For instance, a week or so ago, I rode with a woman who was getting dropped off at the U-Haul. The way he pronounced or spelled U-Haul was H-A-W-L. I think it was U-Haul Truck Depot. She had the wrong address when she set the ride up originally, so finally the driver was able to figure out where the woman was going. When we dropped this passenger off, the driver informed her that she would probably call Ride Inquiry to give them the correct address so she wouldn't end up as a no-show. This woman's response was, "Oh, I'm not taking paratransit home. I'll be renting a U-Haul truck, and I'll be driving it home, but thanks." In other cases over time, I've ridden with passengers that have made comments like, "Oh yeah, I can drive, I just don't have the car right now. And I do have a disability, so that's why I'm riding this service." One person was even bold enough to brag, "Well, after today, I won't need to ride the service anymore because my car will be getting out of the shop." I'd also like to inform you that this same woman drives limousines for a living. She also bragged about that. Now, on the surface, many may say, "Well, Brett, why don't you just mind your own business?" When what they're doing isn't affecting you in any way, but it actually is. This makes it harder for myself and other clients who really need the service to get the ride times we really need. For instance, just last week, I had a work-related appointment that was for 9 a.m. The call taker informed me that with the appointment time, the ride would be at 6:31 a.m. pickup. Now, this is completely ridiculous. I could even see a 7:31 a.m. as being more reasonable than that. I told her, the call taker, to just take the appointment off and we'd try to gamble. This gave me a 7:40 a.m. pickup, which was much more reasonable, but I still got to my appointment 40 minutes late because of all the stops we had to make on the way. This is the next problem. You have clients on buses for 2 and sometimes 3 hours because of all the stops. When I express this frustration often, I'm told that there are more people riding paratransit now. Yes, this may be true, but I'm betting a lot of these people, those people that are riding actually would not qualify. That's speculation, of course, but again, going back to my anecdotal points above, maybe not. Now, someone did inform me that there was a service called MTN, which was put in place to transport Medicaid users to medical appointments only. Well, at one point, something happened where MTN was no longer working with the RTC, or whatever reason, for whatever reason. At one point, something happened where MTN was no longer working for them. And as you know, paratransit is not restricted to just medical appointments, thus giving these people free rein to do whatever they want. Now, I will also throw out someone who may have used that MTN service, may have been able to drive under normal circumstances, but the medical appointments they may be going to may have been things such as dialysis and other procedures that may have left them too weak or incoherent to drive, and that is why they've utilized such a service. Now with paratransit, they realize they're getting something they can take advantage of, and believe me, they are. I feel this is wrong, and it definitely puts a strain on us passengers that use the service for work and medical appointments. I would suggest that such passengers, as mentioned earlier, should be scrutinized a little better. After all, this is a government program, and there is a tendency and even a push to certain solutions to abuse the system. I'm just asking someone to take a better look into what's really going on and stop the abuse. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sincerely, Brett Silver. Case closed.
Okay, thank you for reading that, Dan.
I can't read this.
Last chance for any further comments from the citizens or from board members?
And Madam Chair, I will ask, is Miss Nancy Brune on the line? Just wanted to acknowledge Nancy if she's there. Nancy, are you on the conference bridge?
Yes, she left.
Yes, and she was on the conference
Yeah,
bridge.
she was.
Okay, well, if there are no further comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, we are adjourned. Happy holidays to everybody.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys in January.
Dan, did you want this letter? Did you want this?
I have a copy.